Bullied teen stands up for a homeless man. This thought echoed in Alex's mind as he faced the jeering crowd, his heart pounding against his ribcage like a frightened bird. He hadn't planned on becoming anyone's defender today, especially not for the disheveled man everyone called Crazy Carl, who slept under the park bridge. But something had snapped inside him when he saw Trent and his followers circling the old man, taunting him, kicking his few possessions into the creek. Alex's hands still trembled, his cheeks burning with adrenaline and remnants of shame. For 16 years, he had perfected the art of invisibility, head down, shoulders hunched, moving silently through the hallways of Westridge High. Survival meant blending into walls, becoming furniture. Yet here he stood, breathless, having just shouted words that surprised even himself. "Leave him alone." "What's wrong with you?" The November wind cut through his thin jacket, a physical reminder of his exposure. Standing up meant being seen. Being seen meant becoming a target, again. "Look who found his voice," Trent sneered, his Letterman jacket gleaming red against the gray afternoon. His followers, a pack of varsity athletes and social elites, shifted their attention from the homeless man to Alex. "The ghost speaks. Protecting garbage now, Alvarez?" Alex's tongue felt like sandpaper. The homeless man, Carl, watched from where he crouched, gathering scattered belongings with weathered hands. Their eyes met briefly and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Two invisible men suddenly, painfully visible. "He's not garbage," Alex said, softer now but somehow steadier. "He's a person." Trent stepped closer, invading Alex's space with the confidence of someone who had never experienced consequences. "Well, what was that?" "I said," Alex repeated, finding a wellspring of courage he didn't know existed. "He's a person." The first shove came as expected, hard against his chest, sending him stumbling backward. Alex had endured worse. The physical pain was bearable compared to the daily psychological torment. What surprised him was his refusal to retreat, his feet planted firmly on the damp earth as Carl slowly stood. "That's enough." The homeless man's voice carried unexpected authority. Despite his ragged appearance, the layers of mismatched clothing, the gray-streaked beard, the lined face weathered by sun and hardship, there was something in his posture that made even Trent hesitate. "Stay out of this, old man," Trent warned, but his usual confidence wavered. Carl stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Alex. "I believe the young man asked you to leave." For a suspended moment, the park held its breath. Then Trent laughed, breaking the tension but not the unease. "Whatever. You two freaks deserve each other." He turned to his friends, manufacturing dismissal. "Let's go. It smells like failure here." They retreated, lobbing insults over their shoulders that landed with diminishing impact. When they were gone, the silence expanded between Alex and Carl, filled only by the sound of water moving over stones in the nearby creek. "Thank you," Carl said finally. "Though you shouldn't have put yourself at risk." Alex shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm already on their radar. Has been since freshman year." Still, Carl knelt to gather the last of his belongings. A tattered notebook, a small photo frame with cracked glass, a paperback book with dog-eared pages. "Most people walk by. You didn't." "Yeah, well," Alex shifted his weight, unsure what to do with this unexpected conversation. "They shouldn't treat people like that." A ghost of a smile touched Carl's lips. "No, they shouldn't." He gestured to the bench nearby. "Would you sit with me a moment? My old bones appreciate company that doesn't throw things." Alex hesitated, years of caution warring with an unfamiliar instinct to connect. The warning bells, "Don't trust strangers, especially homeless ones," rang faintly in his mind. But there was something in Carl's eyes, clear, intelligent, kind, that quieted those alarms. "I guess I could." For a minute, they sat in silence as the afternoon light filtered through nearly bare trees. Alex noticed Carl's hands, clean despite his circumstances, with neatly trimmed nails. The man held himself with a dignity that seemed at odds with his situation. "I'm Alex," he offered finally. "Carl Donovan," the man replied, then added with a hint of irony, "Though I've heard Crazy Carl has become the local preference." Alex flushed. "People are jerks. Some are, some aren't." Carl glanced sideways at him. "You're in the latter category, it seems." "You don't know me," Alex said, immediately regretting how defensive it sounded. "True enough." Carl nodded thoughtfully. "But I know what I saw today." The conversation lapsed, but the silence felt less awkward now. Alex found himself noticing details. How Carl's backpack was organized despite being weathered. How his beard, though full, was neatly trimmed. How his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, with alert awareness. "You should head home before dark," Carl said eventually. "Those boys might return." Alex checked his phone. Almost 5, his mother would be calling soon, frantic with worry if he wasn't home. Since his father left 3 years ago, her anxiety had wrapped around him like a second skin. "Yeah, I should go." He stood, then paused. "Will you be okay?" Carl smiled, genuine warmth reaching his eyes. "I've survived worse nights than this, young man." Alex nodded, unsure what else to say. As he turned to leave, he impulsively reached into his backpack and pulled out his lunch container. "There's half a sandwich left. Turkey, if you want it." Carl looked at the offered food, something complex passing over his features. "Thank you," he said finally, accepting it with dignity rather than desperation. "Perhaps I'll see you around, Alex." "Yeah, maybe." Alex backed away, feeling strangely like he was leaving something important unfinished. "Stay warm, Mr. Donovan." "Carl," the man corrected. "Just Carl." The next morning, bruises bloomed across Alex's shoulder where Trent had shoved him against the brick wall after school. He hadn't mentioned the incident to his mother. Elena Alvarez had enough worries managing her 2 jobs and the mounting bills that arrived with depressing regularity. Their small apartment above the laundromat where she worked mornings already felt crowded with unspoken anxieties. He wouldn't add his own troubles to the mix. He slipped on a long-sleeved shirt despite the heated classroom, wincing as the fabric brushed tender skin. Ms. Peterson was discussing The Great Gatsby. At the front of the room, her enthusiasm falling on mostly disinterested ears. Alex tried to focus, but his thoughts kept drifting to Carl, wondering if the man had found shelter from the rain that had fallen heavily through the night. "Alex?" Ms. Peterson's voice cut through his distraction. "Any thoughts on Gatsby's pursuit of Daisy? What does his obsession with wealth and status tell us?" 27 pairs of eyes swiveled toward him. He felt his face flush, that familiar tightness in his chest constricting his breath. "I think," he began, his voice barely audible. He cleared his throat. "I think he believed being rich would make him worthy, like he was nothing without it." Miss Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting. And is he right?" The question hung in the air. Alex thought about Carl, who owned almost nothing yet carried himself with more dignity than most adults he knew. "No," he said with unexpected conviction. "I don't think what you own decides what you're worth." A few students shifted uncomfortably. Trent, 2 rows over, made a loud snoring sound. "Mrs. Peterson ignored him, her focus on Alex. "Well said." She offered a small smile before continuing the lesson. When the bell rang, Alex gathered his books slowly, avoiding Trent's group that always clogged the doorway. "Miss." Peterson approached his desk as the room emptied. "That was a thoughtful response earlier," she said, arranging papers. "I don't often hear from you in discussions." Alex shrugged. "Sorry. No apology needed." She paused. "You know, there's a writing contest I think you might be interested in. The theme is unseen voices in our community." "I'm not really a writer," he mumbled. "Everyone has stories to tell, Alex. Some just haven't found their voice yet." She held out a flyer. "Think about it. First prize is a $5,000 scholarship." He took the paper to be polite, shoving it into his backpack where it would likely remain until it disintegrated into paper pulp. $5,000 seemed like both an impossible sum and a drop in the ocean of what college would cost, if he even got that far. The rest of the school day passed in its usual blur of avoidance strategies and quiet endurance. Alex kept to his routine, using less trafficked hallways, eating lunch in the library's far corner, waiting until the initial rush had cleared before changing for gym. These were the survival tactics he'd perfected, the invisible armor that mostly worked, until yesterday's aberration in the park. After the final bell, instead of taking his usual route home, Alex found himself drawn toward the park. He told himself it was just to avoid Trent's usual hangout spots, but the lie felt thin even to himself. The truth was both simpler and more complicated. He was worried about Carl. The park was quiet in the aftermath of rain, the grass still wet, the paths muddy. Alex approached the bridge with caution, unsure what he hoped to find. The space beneath where Carl had made his temporary home looked abandoned. No backpack, no cardboard laid out as makeshift flooring, no sign of the man. Something like disappointment settled in Alex's chest. He turned to leave when a voice called out, "You came back." Carl emerged from the trees, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked drier than Alex would have expected after such a downpour. Alex fumbled for a reasonable explanation. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." After the rain, Carl studied him with those clear, perceptive eyes. "I found shelter," he said simply, then smiled. "Your concern is appreciated." Alex nodded, suddenly feeling foolish. What had he expected? That he would rescue this grown man? That they would become friends? The absurdity of his impulse struck him fully. "Well, good," he said, already backing away. "I should go." "Actually," Carl said, stopping him, "I was about to have some tea." He gestured to a nearby bench that was mostly dry beneath the canopy of a large oak. "I'd welcome the company if you're not in a hurry." Alex hesitated. His mother wouldn't be home for hours yet. Thursday was her late shift at the diner. He had nothing waiting at home except empty rooms and homework. "I guess I could stay for a bit." Carl nodded as if this were a perfectly normal social arrangement. From his backpack, he produced a small portable camp stove, a dented metal kettle, and 2 chipped but clean mugs. The sight was so unexpected that Alex found himself smiling. "You carry a tea set in your backpack?" "Civilized comforts," Carl replied with dignified humor, "are what separate us from the beasts." He filled the kettle from a water bottle and set it to heat. "Besides, tea soothes the spirit. After yesterday, I imagine your spirit could use some soothing." The casual reference to their shared experience caught Alex off guard. Adults in his life typically avoided uncomfortable topics. His father's abandonment, their financial struggles, the obvious signs of bullying that occasionally came home with him. Carl's directness was disarming. "It was nothing," Alex said automatically. "I'm used to Trent and his friends." Carl measured tea leaves from a small tin into a strainer. "Being accustomed to mistreatment doesn't make it nothing, Alex." The kettle began to whistle softly. Carl poured the steaming water with practiced movements, the fragrance of the tea, something earthy with hints of cinnamon, rising between them. "It's chai," Carl explained, handing Alex a mug. "An old friend taught me to make it properly." Alex accepted the tea, the warmth seeping into his cold fingers. "Thanks." He took a tentative sip and was surprised by the rich, complex flavors. "This is really good." "Life's small pleasures," Carl said, settling back on the bench, "are often its most profound." They sat in companionable silence, sipping tea as the park gradually emptied of the few afternoon visitors. Alex found himself relaxing, the knot of tension he perpetually carried between his shoulders loosening slightly. "May I ask about your situation with those boys?" Carl finally said. Alex stared into his tea. "There's not much to tell. I'm the scholarship kid at a school where that matters. I'm quiet. I like books. My clothes come from thrift stores." He shrugged. "That's enough, I guess." Carl nodded thoughtfully. "And yesterday was the first time you stood up to them?" "To anyone," Alex admitted. "I don't know why I did it. It just happened." "The most important moments in our lives often just happen," Carl said. "It's afterward that we find their meaning." Something about Carl's manner, his thoughtful responses, his careful diction, niggled at Alex's mind. "You don't seem like..." He trailed off, realizing how offensive his observation might be. "Like a homeless person?" Carl finished for him, amusement rather than offense in his tone. "And what should a homeless person seem like, Alex?" The question wasn't accusatory, but genuinely curious. Alex felt his face heat with embarrassment. "I don't know. I'm sorry. That was stupid." "Not stupid. Just incomplete thinking." Carl set his empty mug down. "People become homeless for countless reasons. Some through addiction or mental illness, yes. Others through misfortune, bad decisions, or circumstances beyond their control." He looked at Alex directly. "In my case, it was a choice." Alex blinked in surprise. "You chose to be homeless?" "I chose to step away from my former life," Carl clarified. "The homelessness is a temporary condition, not an identity." Before Alex could ask what that meant, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Working late. Leftover pasta in fridge. Homework first. I need to go," he said, finishing his tea quickly and handing back the mug. "Thanks for the tea." Carl accepted the mug with a nod. "Perhaps we'll continue our conversation another time." Alex hesitated, then made an impulsive decision. "I come this way from school most days. Around this time." The invitation hung in the air between them, unstated but clear. "I'm often here," Carl replied, simply understanding. For the next week, their meetings became a routine. Alex would find Carl near the bridge or by the oak tree, and they would share tea while talking, or sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. Carl never pressed for personal details but listened attentively when Alex offered them. In turn, Carl shared stories from what he called his previous life. Travels across the country and abroad, encounters with fascinating people, books he had read and loved. On Friday, Alex arrived at their meeting spot to find Carl looking through his cracked picture frame, a distant expression on his face. "Is that your family?" Alex asked, settling beside him. Carl hesitated, then handed him the frame. Inside was a photograph of a younger Carl standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a teenage girl with her father's smile. "My wife Margaret and our daughter Sophia," he said quietly. This was taken about 15 years ago. Alex studied the happy family in the photo, trying to reconcile it with the homeless man beside him. "Where are they now?" Pain flickered across Carl's face. "Margaret passed away 8 years ago. Just had cancer." He took a deep breath. "Sophia is in Boston. She's a doctor now. Does she know?" Alex gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "That her father lives like a vagrant?" Carl's smile held sadness. "No, we haven't spoken in almost 5 years." "Why not?" Carl was quiet for so long that Alex thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "After Margaret died, I lost myself. I was a different man then, driven, successful, and suddenly very alone. I made decisions that hurt people, including Sophia." He carefully returned the photo to his backpack. "Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself." The raw honesty of this confession made Alex uncomfortable, yet oddly honored. Adults rarely shared their vulnerabilities with him. "Couldn't you try to contact her?" he suggested. "Maybe she'd forgive you." "Perhaps someday." Carl changed the subject. "How was school today?" Alex recognized the deflection but didn't push. Instead, he shared the small victory of receiving an A on his English essay about The Great Gatsby. The first assignment he'd felt truly engaged with all semester. "Mrs. Peterson asked if she could keep a copy," he said, still surprised by the request. "She said my perspective was refreshingly authentic." "High praise," Carl nodded approvingly. "What perspective was that?" Alex shrugged, embarrassed. "Just stuff about how Gatsby thought becoming rich would solve everything, but it just created new problems. How he was so focused on appearing worthy that he never figured out what actually mattered to him." "Insightful," Carl said. "Many spend their lives accumulating wealth only to discover it doesn't fill the spaces they thought it would." Something in his tone made Alex curious. "What did you do?" "Before, I mean." Carl considered the question. "I built things. Buildings, mostly. I had a company." "You were like a construction worker?" A smile touched Carl's lips. "More on the development and investment side. I chose projects, secured funding, oversaw construction." "So you were the boss," Alex concluded. "Something like that." Carl changed the subject again. "Have you thought more about that writing contest your teacher mentioned?" Alex was surprised Carl remembered this detail from a conversation days ago. "Not really. I'm not a writer. Everyone is a writer, Alex. The question is whether you have something to say. Even if I did, what would I write about?" Carl gestured to the park around them. "You mentioned the theme was unseen voices. There are countless stories here, hiding in plain sight." A cold gust of wind swept through the park, making Alex shiver. The temperature had been dropping steadily all week, with forecasts predicting the first frost soon. "Where will you go when it gets really cold?" he asked abruptly. Carl's expression remained neutral. "There are shelters. I'll manage. But shelters are dangerous, aren't they? And crowded? They have their challenges," Carl acknowledged. "But survival often requires compromise." Alex frowned, trying to imagine this dignified man in a crowded shelter. The image felt wrong somehow. "It's not fair. Few things are." Carl's voice held no self-pity. "But fairness is an expectation, not a natural law." Before Alex could respond, a familiar voice called his name. He turned to see his mother approaching rapidly across the park, her work uniform still on beneath her coat, her face a mask of worry and confusion. "Alex, I've been calling you for an hour." Elena Alvarez reached them, slightly out of breath, her accent thickening with stress as it always did. "Mrs. Kapoor said she saw you come this way instead of home." "What are you doing?" Her eyes darted to Carl, suspicion and fear immediately replacing concern. She grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him up from the bench. "Come. We're going home. Now." "Mom, wait." Alex tried to resist, embarrassed by her reaction. "This is my friend, Carl." Elena's grip tightened. "Friend?" "Alex, he's..." She stopped herself, but the implication hung in the air. Homeless, dangerous, not someone her son should associate with. Carl stood slowly, his posture respectful. "Mrs. Alvarez, I apologize for any worry I've caused." Alex has simply been kind enough to share conversation with an old man. His dignified manner seemed to catch Elena off guard, but her protective instincts remained firmly in place. My son needs to focus on school and his future. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Carl nodded. Education should be his priority. Alex felt caught between them, shame and frustration building in his chest. Mom, Carl's not... We're going home, Elena repeated firmly. Now, the walk home passed in tense silence. Once inside their small apartment, Elena's composure broke. What were you thinking? She demanded in Spanish, her native language emerging as it always did when she was upset. Sitting with a homeless man? He could be dangerous, disturbed. He's not, Alex protested. He's smart, Mom. He reads books and makes tea and tells interesting stories. Tea? Elena looked horrified. You've been accepting food from a stranger? He's not a stranger anymore, Alex argued. I've been talking with him all week. All week, Elena's voice rose. Dios mío, Alex. What's gotten into you? This isn't like you. The words stung because they were true. This wasn't like him, the quiet, compliant son who never caused problems. But something had shifted since that day he stood up to Trent. Some dormant part of himself awakening. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible, he said quietly. Elena's expression softened slightly. She approached him, placing her hands on his shoulders. Mijo, I know things have been hard since your father left, but seeking attention from strangers isn't the answer. That's not what I'm doing. Alex pulled away, frustrated by her misunderstanding. Carl listens to me. He doesn't treat me like I'm fragile or stupid. And I do? Hurt flashed in Elena's eyes. Alex immediately regretted his words. No, Mom, that's not what I meant. Elena sighed, pushing her hair back from her forehead. A gesture so familiar it made Alex's chest ache with love for her, despite his frustration. Alex, I work 2 jobs so you can have opportunities I never had. So you can go to that school, maybe college someday. Her voice trembled slightly. Everything I do is to protect your future. I know, he said softly. Then understand why I can't let you risk that future by associating with... She hesitated. With someone like Carl? Alex finished. Mom, he used to have a company. He has a daughter who's a doctor. He's educated. Elena's expression remained skeptical. If he had such a good life, why is he homeless now? It was a fair question, one Alex had wondered himself. I don't know all the details, but people end up in bad situations for all kinds of reasons. Exactly my point, Elena said firmly. I don't want you near the park alone anymore. You come straight home after school. Mom, this isn't negotiable, Alex. Her tone made it clear the discussion was over. Now, have you eaten? There's still some chicken from yesterday. Alex recognized the shift. From confrontation to caregiving, her way of restoring normalcy. I'm not hungry, he said, retreating to his room. I have homework. In the solitude of his small bedroom, Alex replayed the conversation with his mother, frustration giving way to understanding. Of course she was afraid. Being a single mother in a country where she'd arrived as a teenager, still learning the language and customs, had made caution her default setting. Fear was her constant companion. Fear of not making rent, of Alex getting hurt, of the countless vulnerabilities that poverty created. He pulled out his homework but couldn't focus. Instead, he found himself reaching for the writing contest flyer Ms. Peterson had given him, now wrinkled from its time at the bottom of his backpack. Unseen voices in our community stared back at him in bold letters. Carl's words echoed in his mind. Everyone is a writer. The question is whether you have something to say. For the first time, Alex thought maybe he did. Sukshurin. The weekend stretched endlessly with Elena keeping a watchful eye on him, suggesting they run errands together, asking him to help with deep cleaning the apartment, activities clearly designed to keep him home and occupied. By Sunday evening, Alex had cleaned out his closet, reorganized the kitchen cabinets, and started 3 different homework assignments due later in the week. What he hadn't done was write a single word for the contest, though the idea continued to gnaw at him. Every time he opened a blank document, uncertainty paralyzed him. Who was he to tell anyone's story? What did he know about writing that would impress judges? Monday morning arrived with bitter cold, the season's first frost coating the ground. Alex hurried to school, hands thrust deep in the pockets of his jacket. Not nearly warm enough for the weather, but the only one he had. He thought of Carl and wondered how he was managing in this cold, whether he'd found a shelter or somewhere warm to sleep. The day passed in a gray haze until English class, where Ms. Peterson returned their essays on The Great Gatsby. Excellent work, Alex, she said quietly as she placed his paper on his desk. I meant what I said about the writing contest. You have a voice worth hearing. The encouragement stayed with him through the rest of the day, a small warmth against the pervasive chill of the school hallways. When the final bell rang, Alex hesitated at the front entrance. His mother's warning was clear: come straight home. But the worry that had been building all day wouldn't subside. Just a quick detour, he decided, just to make sure Carl was okay in this cold. He wouldn't stay to talk. The park was nearly deserted, the cold keeping most people indoors. Alex hurried toward their usual meeting spot, scanning for any sign of Carl. The bench beneath the oak tree stood empty, no trace of the portable stove or tea mugs. The area under the bridge looked equally abandoned. Disappointment and worry twisted in Alex's stomach. He was about to leave when he noticed something half hidden behind a tree near the bench. Carl's backpack, partially covered by fallen leaves as if placed there intentionally. Alex approached slowly, a sense of unease growing. Carl was meticulous about his few possessions. He wouldn't leave his backpack unattended. Something was wrong. "Carl," he called out, receiving only silence in response. He crouched beside the backpack, noticing it was unzipped. The photo frame with its cracked glass lay on top, along with Carl's notebook and a small leather wallet Alex had never seen before. The wallet had fallen open, revealing a driver's license. Alex hesitated, knowing he shouldn't pry into Carl's private things, but concern overrode his hesitation. He picked up the license, hoping it might provide some clue to Carl's whereabouts. The name on the ID read Carlton J. Donovan. The address listed was in the wealthy area of Westridge Heights. The photo was unmistakably Carl, though cleaner shaven and better dressed than Alex had ever seen him. Confusion clouded Alex's thoughts. Why would Carl have an ID with an address in the most expensive neighborhood in town? Was it fake? Stolen? A groan from beyond the trees interrupted his thoughts. Alex shoved the ID back into the wallet and moved toward the sound. There, slumped against a tree trunk, was Carl. His face was pale, a sheen of sweat visible despite the cold. His breathing labored. "Carl!" Alex rushed to him, dropping to his knees. What happened? Are you hurt? Carl's eyes opened slowly, recognition dawning. "Alex," he managed weakly. "You shouldn't be here. You're sick," Alex said, placing a hand on Carl's forehead and feeling alarming heat. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No hospitals," Carl murmured, trying to sit up straighter and wincing with the effort. "I'll be fine. Just need rest." "This isn't just being tired," Alex insisted. "You have a fever. Is it your heart? Should I call an ambulance?" Carl shook his head firmly, despite his weakness. "No ambulance. Too expensive. And unnecessary." "Then let me help you to a clinic or shelter," Alex pleaded. "The shelters are full in this weather," Carl said. "And I don't have medical insurance for a clinic." Alex bit his lip, torn between respecting Carl's wishes and his growing certainty that the man needed medical attention. A compromise formed in his mind. "My mom's at work until 8, he said. "You can come to our apartment, get warm, rest a little. Then we'll figure out what to do." Carl seemed about to refuse. Then another shiver ran through him. "Perhaps, just to warm up," he conceded. Getting Carl to his feet was a struggle. The man was taller than Alex and, despite his leanness, solid. Once standing, he swayed dangerously, leaning heavily against Alex's shoulder. "My backpack," Carl remembered. "I've got it," Alex assured him, having already slung it over his other shoulder. The journey to Alex's apartment was slow and difficult. Twice they had to stop for Carl to rest, his breathing becoming more labored with each block. By the time they reached the apartment building, Alex was practically supporting Carl's entire weight. Mrs. Kapoor from the first floor was coming out as they approached. Her eyes widened at the sight of them. "Alex, what's happening? Who is this man?" "He's my friend," Alex said, struggling under Carl's weight. "He's sick. I'm just helping him get warm." Mrs. Kapoor looked skeptical but held the door open for them. "Does your mother know about this?" "I'll call her," Alex promised, avoiding a direct answer as he maneuvered Carl toward the stairs. The climb to the third-floor apartment was the worst part. By the time they reached the top, Carl was barely conscious and Alex was trembling with exertion. He fumbled with his keys, finally managing to unlock the door and guide Carl to the couch. Carl collapsed onto the cushions, his eyes closed, his breathing ragged. Up close, in the apartment's light, he looked worse than Alex had realized. His skin ashen except for 2 bright spots of fever on his cheeks, his lips cracked from dehydration. Alex fetched a glass of water and helped Carl drink small sips. Then he retrieved the thermometer from the bathroom cabinet, coaxing Carl to keep it under his tongue. 102.8 degrees. Definitely a fever. "I'm calling my mom," Alex decided, reaching for his phone. Carl's hand shot out with surprising strength, grasping Alex's wrist. "No," He whispered. She'll worry. She's already going to kill me for bringing you here, Alex said. But you need help, and I don't know what to do. Carl released his grip, too weak to argue further. Alex stepped into the kitchen to make the call, mentally preparing for his mother's reaction. Elena answered on the second ring. Alex, is everything okay? Mom, he began, his voice shaking slightly. I need you to not be angry, but I need your help. A pause. What did you do? Her tone was instantly alert, maternal radar detecting trouble. I went to check on Carl after school. Alex, I told you. Mom, please, he interrupted. He's really sick. He has a high fever and can barely walk. I brought him to our apartment. You what? The shock in her voice was clear. You brought a homeless man into our home? He needs help, Mom, Alex pleaded. I didn't know what else to do. Elena was silent for a long moment. Then, I'll be home in 20 minutes. Don't let him out of your sight, and don't touch anything he's touched without washing your hands. Understand? Yes, Alex agreed, relief flooding him. Section, thank you. When he returned to the living room, Carl was trying to stand, using the armrest for support. I should go, he said weakly. I've put you in a difficult position. You're not going anywhere. Alex insisted, gently pushing him back down. My mom's coming home. She's worked as a medical assistant before. She'll know what to do. Carl didn't have the strength to resist. He sank back onto the couch, his eyes closing. I'm sorry, he murmured. This isn't what I wanted. Alex covered him with a blanket from the closet. Just rest, okay? While waiting for his mother, Alex filled a bowl with cool water and found a clean washcloth. Hesitantly, remembering how his mother would do this when he was sick as a child, he placed the damp cloth on Carl's forehead. The man sighed, some tension easing from his face. Alex then noticed Carl's shoes, worn leather boots caked with mud, still on his feet. Carefully, he unlaced them and set them by the door. Carl's socks had holes, his ankles thin and vulnerable looking. The sight made Alex's throat tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. True to her word, Elena arrived in record time, still wearing her diner uniform. She entered the apartment cautiously, her eyes immediately finding the figure on their couch. Mom, Alex began, prepared to defend his actions. Elena held up a hand to silence him, then approached Carl. Her nursing training took over as she assessed him with clinical efficiency, checking his pulse, feeling his forehead, listening to his breathing. How long has he been like this? She asked Alex. I don't know. I found him like this after school. Elena frowned, then addressed Carl directly, her voice professional but not unkind. Sir, can you hear me? Carl's eyes opened slowly. Yes, he managed. I apologize for the intrusion, Mrs. Alvarez. Can you tell me what hurts? Chest, Carl admitted. Breathing is difficult. And I'm cold, then hot. Elena's frown deepened. Alex, bring me the thermometer. After checking his temperature again, now 103.1, Elena stood up decisively. He needs a doctor. This could be pneumonia. No hospitals, Carl protested weakly. No insurance. Elena's expression softened slightly. The community clinic on Elm Street has a sliding scale. They won't turn anyone away. She looked at Alex. Call them and see if they can take a walk-in emergency. If not, we'll have to go to the ER regardless. Alex nodded, grateful for his mother's practical approach and the absence of the anger he'd expected. He made the call while Elena continued to assess Carl, her trained eyes noting details Alex had missed. The bluish tint to his lips, the way his chest seemed to labor with each breath. They can see him if we come right now, Alex reported after speaking with the clinic. They close at 7. Good to where you're good, Elena nodded. Help me get him to the car. Between the two of them, they managed to get Carl down to Elena's aged Honda. The effort left him even weaker, and by the time they reached the clinic, he was drifting in and out of consciousness. The next few hours passed in a blur of forms, examinations, and waiting. The clinic doctor confirmed Elena's suspicion. Pneumonia, likely exacerbated by exposure to the cold and poor nutrition. They administered antibiotics and IV fluids, explaining that normally they would recommend hospitalization, but given Carl's insistence against it, they would provide outpatient treatment if he had somewhere warm to stay and someone to monitor his condition. Elena and Alex exchanged looks at this pronouncement. A silent communication passed between them. A question from Elena, a plea from Alex. Finally, Elena sighed. He can stay with us, she said to the doctor. For a few days until he's stronger. Alex squeezed his mother's hand in gratitude. As they helped a slightly more stable Carl back to the car, the doctor pulled Elena aside with a prescription and care instructions. Alex helped Carl into the back seat, where the man sank back against the headrest, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Thank you," Carl said softly. "But remember, both of you, rest now," Alex told him. "You're going to be okay." When Elena returned to the car, her expression was troubled. She handed Alex a small paper bag from the pharmacy. "They had some samples of the antibiotic he needs," she explained, "and they discounted the rest based on his situation." The drive home was silent, except for Carl's labored breathing. Once back at the apartment, they settled him on the couch again with fresh blankets and pillows. Elena prepared a simple broth while Alex helped Carl take his first dose of medication. After Carl had eaten a little and fallen into a fitful sleep, Elena motioned for Alex to join her in the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Alex braced himself for the lecture he'd been expecting since his phone call. Instead, his mother simply looked tired. "The doctor says he's severely malnourished," she said, "and that his condition could have become life-threatening if left untreated." She paused. "You potentially saved his life today, Alex." The praise was unexpected. "I was just worried about him." Elena studied him, something like pride mingling with concern in her expression. "You have a good heart, like your father used to have." She sighed. "But this situation, it's complicated. We know nothing about this man." "I know he's kind," Alex said, "and intelligent. And he listens to me, really listens, not just waiting for his turn to talk." Elena's expression softened. "That's something valuable, I know." She hesitated. "Alex, when you were helping him into the car, something fell from his pocket. I picked it up thinking it was medication, but..." She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it to Alex. It was heavy stock, embossed with the name Donovan Development Group and a downtown address. Beneath that, in smaller print, Carlton J. Donovan, CEO. Alex stared at the card, connecting it with the driver's license he'd seen earlier. "I don't understand," he admitted. "Neither do I," Elena said. "But I think there's more to your friend than he's telling us." Carl's fever broke during the night. Elena had insisted on taking the first watch, sending Alex to bed despite his protests. When he emerged from his room early the next morning, he found his mother asleep in the armchair beside the couch, a half-empty mug of coffee on the side table. Carl was awake, his eyes clearer than the day before, watching Elena with an expression Alex couldn't quite decipher. Something between gratitude and shame. "Hey," Alex said softly, not wanting to wake his mother. "How are you feeling?" "Better?" Carl replied, his voice still rough but stronger. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman." Alex nodded, glancing fondly at Elena's sleeping form. "Yeah, she is." He hesitated, then decided directness was best. "We found your business card." Carl's expression didn't change, but something in his posture tensed slightly. Was all he said. "So it's true? You're really a CEO?" Carl corrected. "I stepped down from active management about 5 years ago." "But you still own the company?" Carl nodded slowly. "Technically, yes. The board handles day-to-day operations, but the majority ownership remains mine." Alex struggled to reconcile this information with the homeless man he'd befriended. "I don't understand. If you're rich, why live on the streets?" Elena stirred at the sound of their voices, blinking awake. She straightened immediately upon seeing Carl conscious, slipping back into caregiver mode. "You're awake." "You're good." She felt his forehead. "The fever's down." "How's your breathing?" "Improved thanks to your care," Carl answered, then addressed both of them. "I owe you an explanation." "Yes," Elena agreed firmly, folding her arms. "You do." Carl adjusted himself to sit straighter, wincing slightly at the effort. "After my wife died, I lost my way. The company had been our shared dream, and suddenly it felt meaningless without her." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I threw myself into work, became driven by profit rather than purpose. I made decisions that hurt people. Employees I laid off for minor efficiency gains. Small businesses we pushed out for development projects." He looked down at his hands. "My daughter Sophia saw what I was becoming. We argued. She called me heartless, said her mother would be ashamed of what I'd done to our legacy." Pain flickered across his face at the memory. "She was right. That doesn't explain why you're homeless," Elena said, her tone softer but still skeptical. "No," Carl agreed. "That came later. After Sophia and I stopped speaking, I had what some might call a breakdown. I stepped back from the company, started drinking too much." He shook his head. "One night, about 6 months ago, I was at my lowest point. I walked out of my house in Westridge Heights with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and my wallet." "You just left?" Alex asked, trying to understand. I had no plan, Carl admitted. I just needed to escape who I'd become. I wandered downtown, ended up giving a homeless veteran my coat when I saw him shivering. He offered to share his spot under the bridge in return. A small smile touched his lips. That simple exchange, giving something without expectation, receiving gratitude in return, it was the first real human connection I'd felt in years. So you decided to become homeless? Elena's disbelief was evident. Not exactly, Carl said. I intended to go back the next day, but something about the experience, it stripped away everything I'd been hiding behind. Status, wealth, power. For the first time, I was just a human being connecting with another human being. He looked at Alex. I decided to stay another day. Then another. Eventually, I went back to my house only to collect some essentials and set up automatic payments for my bills. But why? Alex pressed. You could have just, I don't know, volunteered at a shelter or something. Carl nodded thoughtfully. I could have. Perhaps I should have. But I needed to understand what I'd become blind to. How it feels to be truly vulnerable. To be seen as nothing more than a problem, an inconvenience. He met Alex's eyes. Until you came along and saw me as a person, Elena's expression remained skeptical, but Alex could see her softening. Your daughter, she said. Does she know where you are? What you're doing? Pain flashed across Carl's face. No. I've written her letters, but I haven't sent them. I'm not sure she would want to hear from me. She would, Alex said with certainty. She'd want to know you're okay. Carl looked unconvinced. Perhaps. But I needed to become someone different, someone better before trying to reconnect. Elena stood up abruptly. I need to get ready for work. She glanced at Alex. You should be getting ready for school. Mom, I can't just leave. Yes, you can, she interrupted. You've missed enough school lately. Mr. Donovan will be fine here for the day. She fixed Carl with a stern look. You will rest and take your medication. And when I get home, we will discuss what happens next. After she left the room, Carl looked at Alex with newfound respect. She's formidable. Yeah, Alex agreed with a small smile. She's had to be. He gathered his school things reluctantly, still worried about leaving Carl alone. At the door, he hesitated. Will you still be here when I get back? Carl's expression was solemn. I promise. School was a blur of distraction. Alex found it impossible to focus on logarithms or the causes of World War I when his mind kept returning to Carl's story. The revelation explained so much. Carl's educated speech, his dignified manner, his insights into wealth and status. Yet it also raised new questions. What would happen when Carl recovered? Would he return to the streets or to his mansion in Westridge Heights? And what did any of it mean for their unlikely friendship? In English class, Miss Peterson announced the deadline for the writing contest. Friday, just 3 days away. As other students groaned about the pressure, Alex found himself opening a blank document on his laptop and typing a title, The Millionaire Under the Bridge. The words began to flow, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. He wrote about first impressions and hidden depths, about the value of being seen for who you are rather than what you have or don't have. He wrote about Carl without using his name, about their conversations over tea, about learning that worth isn't measured by possessions. By the time the bell rang, he had 3 pages in a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. Trent caught up with him in the hallway after class. Hey, Alvarez, he called, his usual sneer in place. Haven't seen your homeless buddy lately. He finally get arrested or something? Alex stopped walking, something shifting inside him. The old fear was still there, but alongside it was something new. A certainty that Trent's opinion no longer mattered. His name is Carl, Alex said calmly. And no, he's staying with my family while recovering from pneumonia. Trent blinked, thrown by the direct response. You let that dirty bum into your house? Gross. Actually, Alex continued, his voice steady. He's probably worth more than your family and everyone else's in this school combined. He owns Donovan Development Group. Trent's expression flickered between disbelief and uncertainty. You're lying. Look it up. Alex shrugged, walking away. Or don't. It doesn't really matter what you think. For the first time since he could remember, Alex walked through the school hallways with his head up, not scanning for threats or seeking the protection of walls. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant, as if he'd been holding his breath for years and finally allowed himself to exhale. When he arrived home, he found the apartment filled with unfamiliar but enticing smells. Following them to the kitchen, he discovered Carl, looking remarkably better, stirring something on the stove. You're supposed to be resting, Alex said, dropping his backpack on a chair. Carl smiled. I've rested all day. And cooking is hardly strenuous. He gestured to the pot. I hope you don't mind. I thought making dinner was the least I could do to thank you and your mother. Alex peered into the pot, some kind of stew with vegetables and rich-smelling broth. It smells amazing. I didn't know we had ingredients for something like this. You didn't, Carl admitted. I had some groceries delivered. You can do that? Carl nodded. My wallet and phone were in my backpack. My accounts are still active, even if I haven't been using them much lately. Alex settled at the kitchen table, watching Carl move comfortably around the small space. So what happens now? Are you going to go back to your real life? Carl considered the question as he stirred the stew. I'm not sure going back is the right framework. I can't undo the past 5 months, nor would I want to. He glanced at Alex. They've taught me too much. But you can't just keep living under a bridge, Alex pointed out, especially not with winter coming. No, Carl agreed. That phase of my journey is likely over. He tasted the stew, added a pinch of salt. Your mother made that quite clear when she checked my temperature this morning. Alex smiled, imagining the scene. She can be pretty convincing. Indeed. Carl's expression grew thoughtful. I've been thinking about what comes next. I'd like to use my resources more meaningfully this time. Like charity work. Perhaps, but more direct than writing checks. Carl turned to face Alex fully. What if I established a community center in the downtown area? Somewhere that offers services for the homeless, job training, educational opportunities. A place that treats people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. The idea lit something in Alex's imagination. That would be amazing. It would require work, Carl cautioned. And I'd need help from people who understand what's truly needed, not just what looks good on paper. Their conversation was interrupted by Elena's return from work. She entered the kitchen with visible surprise at the domestic scene before her. You're cooking, she observed, her tone indicating she wasn't sure whether to be pleased or concerned. A small token of gratitude, Carl replied. I hope you like beef bourguignon. Elena raised an eyebrow at the fancy name but didn't comment. How are you feeling? Much improved thanks to your care. Carl gestured for her to sit. I've been telling Alex about some ideas for my next steps. Over dinner, which even Elena had to admit was delicious, Carl outlined his vision for the community center. As he spoke, his voice grew stronger, his eyes brighter with purpose. Elena listened skeptically at first, then with growing interest. It sounds worthwhile, she said finally. But why now? What changed? Carl's gaze shifted to Alex. I met someone who reminded me that seeing people, truly seeing them, is the first step toward meaningful change. Alex felt his face warm at the unexpected praise. And your daughter? Elena pressed. Will you contact her? Carl nodded slowly. Yes, it's time. Whether she forgives me or not, she deserves to know the truth. After dinner, while Elena and Carl continued talking, Alex returned to his room and his essay. The words came more easily now, shaped by the day's revelations and Carl's vision for the future. He wrote late into the night, forgetting time, lost in the story he needed to tell. The next 3 days established a new routine. Alex attended school, worked on his essay during lunch and after classes, then returned home to find Carl and Elena in deep conversation. Carl's health improved rapidly with proper medication and nutrition, and by Thursday, he was well enough to make phone calls, first to his lawyer to begin the process of establishing the Community Center Foundation, then a longer, more difficult call to his daughter in Boston. Alex had given him privacy for that conversation, but when he emerged from his room later, he found Carl sitting on the balcony, his eyes red-rimmed, but peaceful. How did it go? Alex asked cautiously. Better than I deserved, Carl replied. She was angry, hurt. She cried. He paused. But she listened, and she's flying in tomorrow to see me. That's good, right? It's a beginning, Carl said. A chance to rebuild what I destroyed. He looked at Alex with genuine gratitude, which I wouldn't have without you. Alex shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what anyone would do. No, Carl shook his head firmly. Most people walk past me every day without a second glance. You stopped. You saw me, he smiled. And then you stood up for me against those boys, which was both foolish and extraordinarily brave. Alex remembered that day in the park, how terrified he'd been, how unexpected his own actions had seemed. I don't know why I did it, he admitted. I never stand up to anyone. Perhaps you needed to stand up for someone else before you could stand up for yourself. Carl suggested, I've noticed a change in you these past weeks. Yeah, Alex agreed, thinking about his confrontation with Trent. I guess I have changed. On Friday morning, Alex submitted his essay to Ms. Peterson just before the deadline. She scanned the first page, her eyes widening slightly. This is unexpected, she said. In a good way. Is it okay? Alex asked anxiously. I know it's different from what others probably wrote. Miss Peterson smiled. Different is exactly what the judges will be looking for. She placed the essay carefully in her folder. Regardless of the contest outcome, I'm proud of you for writing this, Alex. That afternoon, Carl was dressed in new clothes. Simple but well-fitting jeans and a sweater that Elena had helped him order online. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hair cut by Elena's skilled hands. He looked both like the homeless man Alex had befriended and someone entirely new. A man between worlds, perhaps, or simply himself without pretense. Sophia's flight lands at 4. He said, his nervousness evident in the way he checked his watch repeatedly. Your mother has kindly offered to drive me to the airport. I wish I could come, Alex said. Another time, Carl promised. There will be many opportunities for you to meet her, if you want to. I'd like that. Alex hesitated, then added, what will you tell her about everything? The truth, Carl said simply. That I lost myself after her mother died. That I made terrible mistakes. That living on the streets taught me what truly matters. He smiled. And that a brave young man showed me kindness when I least expected it and most needed it. I still can't believe you're a secret millionaire, Alex said, shaking his head. It's like something from a movie. Carl laughed. Life is stranger than fiction sometimes. He grew serious. Alex, I want you to know that regardless of what happens with Sophia or the foundation, your friendship has changed me. You've given me a gift I can never fully repay. You don't have to repay friendship, Alex said. No, Carl agreed, but I can pay it forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. I hope you'll accept this, not as payment, but as an investment in your future. Alex took the envelope cautiously. Inside was a certificate establishing a college scholarship fund in his name, with enough money to cover a full education at any university. I can't accept this, he said, stunned. It's too much. It's nothing compared to what you've given me, Carl countered, and it comes with no obligations. Whether you become a writer, a doctor, or something else entirely, the choice will be yours. Before Alex could respond, Elena appeared from her bedroom, ready to drive Carl to the airport. She glanced at the certificate in Alex's hands and raised an eyebrow at Carl. I told you he would protest, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. You knew about this? Alex asked, surprised. Mr. Donovan and I have had many conversations while you were at school, Elena replied. About your future, among other things. The realization that his mother and Carl had formed their own bond, independent of him, was unexpected but somehow right. They were both adults who cared about him, who wanted the best for him, even if they sometimes disagreed about what that meant. At the door, Carl extended his hand to Alex. This isn't goodbye, he said firmly. Just a transition to a new chapter. Alex ignored the hand and hugged him instead. Good luck with Sophia, he said. Tell her the truth. She'll understand. Carl returned the embrace, his voice thick with emotion. I will. After they left, Alex found himself alone in the quiet apartment. He reread the scholarship certificate, still unable to fully comprehend how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. From a boy who made himself invisible to avoid pain, he had somehow become someone who stood up, who spoke out, who wrote his truth. He pulled out his phone and navigated to the writing contest website, where the winners would be announced in 2 weeks. Whether he won or not suddenly seemed less important than the fact that he had written something real, something that mattered to him. On the screen of his phone was a text from an unknown number. This is Sophia Donovan. My father gave me your number. I wanted to thank you for saving his life, in more ways than one. I hope to meet you soon. Alex smiled and began to type a reply. Outside his window, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across his desk. Winter was coming, but for the first time in years, Alex looked toward the future with hope rather than dread. The homeless man might have been a secret millionaire, but the true wealth Alex had gained couldn't be measured in dollars. It was in finding his voice, in standing up for what mattered, in seeing people, truly seeing them, for who they were beyond labels and circumstances. That, he realized, was the most valuable lesson of all.